Good morning, Miami.
Good morning.
Isn't it a great day downtown?
Yes.
And we love that we're here in this great FIU facility. We are FIU and we come to you downtown. As the Business School of the Americas, we are South Florida's most important business education resource and recognized leader in the international business education. I'm Mel McGuire. I'm the Executive Director for Management Development. I'm brand new to FIU and I'm very excited to be with the College of Business. A little bit of our VIP introductions. First of all, I'd like to introduce, recognize Mitch Medique, our President Emeritus at FIU. He served with distinction for 23 years and helped grow the college, the university the way it is, and we thank you very much for that. And his beautiful wife Nancy is here. Stand up and be recognized. And actually, our most important people here are our students. So I want all the students to stand up and be recognized. And I may miss some people, so I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm not sure who's actually come into the room, but I want to recognize Larry Harris. He's on our President's Council. Where's Larry? Okay, also we have Joyce Elan. She's the Dean of our University College. Stand up and be recognized. And we have our Associate Dean, Nancy Borkowski. She's the head of our healthcare programs. Where's Nancy? And we also have our Associate Dean, Jerry Haar. He's the director of our Great Pinot Global Entrepreneurship Center, which is, so you know, is going to be moving downtown, so we're going to have great access to our business people. We want to thank Whole Foods for sponsorship of this breakfast and Books and Books, both two great community partners, and we are very proud at FIU to work with them. We also want to let you know this is our first major event at our Brickell Avenue since we opened the store in September 2001. As a College of Business downtown Miami, we believe in lifelong learning from undergraduate degrees to executive education to graduate programs. How appropriate is it for this speaker to be launching the first Wertheim lecture series downtown? But my real job here is to spend a few minutes and introduce you to our Dean, David Clark. Our Dean joined us on October 1st as the FIU College of Business and Right of Eminent Scholar in Business. Previously, he held school deanships at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and Cal Poly Pomona. Between his time as faculty member at Virginia Tech, the University of Florida, and UCF, and his tenure as a dean, Dr. Clark spent 15 years as CEO and chairman of Comp Benefits Corp., which was sold to Humana in 2006. During his tenure, Comp Benefits revenue rose from less than $20 million to more than $360 million. So he is himself a great entrepreneur. But I'm very proud that I joined the College of Business, and one of the procuring causes of that was this dean. I was just dazzled. He's got great academic background and great business background. So without any further comments from me, please come up, Dean.
Morning. Morning. We're so happy to have you here. This is a special event. We have not been in this building since 2001. It's actually 2011.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. And we've been adding space literally as we speak. We actually have additional space under construction in the North Tower. We're actually sitting in the South Tower. We have 60,000 square feet here. It is an exceptional facility that we're very, very proud. Multiple rooms like this where we teach some exceptional students. One of the great things about FIU is our 50,000 students, 8,200 of which are in the College of Business. They are very special students. They're very bright, have high SAT scores, great high school grades. They're great students. But they're also, many of them are what I would call students of opportunity. They come from modest economic backgrounds, but they are very bright, very intense, and they see FIU as the door to opportunity. And that's our mission, that's our purpose. Our focus is taking care of those awesome, awesome students and making sure that we are their door to opportunity. And we do that every day, and we take great pride in that. It is an exceptional mission and one that we treasure. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker today. And I have quickly read most of his book, and it is a book you should all read. I had the blessing of being one of 6 people that started a company, and none of us quit our day jobs for a long time, and we struggled. And many of the things that he's talking about was important to our organization. And it is a book that really captures things that are really critical and important to successful business growth. And I would highly recommend it. He is co-founder and co-CEO of Whole Foods Market. It's a $12 billion company. It has 73,000 team members. And having heard him speak, those 73,000 people are very important. There's a passion about those people that I think is very evident. They've been 15 years consecutively in Fortune magazine's 100 best places to work. He should be very, very proud of that. And he is co-author of a new book, Conscious Capitalism. I welcome him. Give him a warm FIU welcome.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
So, quick inventory. How many of you are either, like a lot of students, how many are students of business that are here? And how many work or are involved in business somehow or another? So almost everybody. Who's, like, doesn't belong in this? Who accidentally thinks something else is supposed to go on today? You know, as I've been doing this book tour for the past 3 months, really since the very beginning, middle of January, I started this tour and been all over the country. And one of the things that I've learned on the tour is basically how demoralized the business community is around the United States. I didn't realize that until I went out and started speaking to people. Business has been beat up so badly. And the narrative about business in our society is that business people are basically selfish, greedy, exploitative, and really only care about money. And that's the narrative about business. And as I've gone around and talked and about the book, and as people read the book, we put forth a different narrative about business. And that's really part of the reason we wrote the book, is we like to say business is fundamentally good, and it could be so much better if done consciously and with a view of higher purpose and stakeholder model. So, to show you how bad business reputation is, the Gallup poll shows that the overall approval rating of big business in America, the corporations, is only about 19%. 81% of people Gallup polls don't think well of business. And that's a very, very low rating. And so it's a couple of points higher than Congress still. But they're almost about exactly the same, just slightly higher in business. And it's so wrong, because business and capitalism have been the greatest value creators in the world. Business has basically lifted humanity up out of the dirt. And that story is not told. It can be easily proven if you just go back and examine where the world was before capitalism was invented. Capitalism hasn't been around that long. It's only been around a couple of hundred years. It's basically synonymous with the Industrial Revolution. And so 200 years ago, or 210 years ago, around 1800, over 85% of everyone alive on the whole planet Earth, which was only about 1 billion people back then, lived on less than $1 a day. And that's in today's dollars. We oftentimes hear about capitalism creating inequality in society. You have to go back and see what it was like before capitalism existed. And we still had inequality. There were the aristocracy, the elites. They owned the land and they were very powerful. And then there was everybody else, and they were all really poor. So there was equality, and equality of poverty, where nobody had anything. People struggled to live. Today, that 85% of people living on less than $1 a day has dropped down to only about 16%, which is admittedly too high. But the reason it's still so high is so much of the world had not, and still hasn't, embraced capitalism or economic freedom. And as I like to say, that the problem in the world is not that we have an inequality of income. The problem in the world is that we have an inequality in the distribution of capitalism. The countries that embrace economic freedom become prosperous, and those that don't stay poor. 200 years ago, the illiteracy rates on the planet Earth were over 90%. We lived in a world of illiteracy. Today, that's down to about 14%. And the trend lines show we'll probably wipe out poverty and we'll wipe out illiteracy in the 21st century. In fact, looking at all the young people here today, most of you will live long enough to see poverty eliminated and illiteracy eliminated. That will be something that happens this century if we continue to embrace economic freedom and capitalism. 200 years ago, the average lifespan was the same as it had been for the past 40,000 years. The average lifespan was 30 or less. People did not live a long time. Today, the average lifespan is 68 across the world. 78 in the United States, 82 in Japan, which is the longest lived nation. We're not wiping out death yet, but we have extended the lifespan immeasurably. And that, again, is due to the prosperity and the great progress that capitalism has created in our world. Why, if capitalism's done so many great things, why is it so disliked? Why are business people so disliked? And I think it's interesting to realize that business people have never been well-liked. There is no historical precedent for business people being admired and liked. If you go back and you study history, you will see that oftentimes the business people were other ethnic groups. In Europe, oftentimes business was left to the Jews to do, and they were routinely persecuted for it, run out of countries, their wealth confiscated. In the East, it was oftentimes the Chinese. The Chinese were the great merchants of the Eastern world. The exact same thing happened to them. They were routinely persecuted, their wealth confiscated, and just basically stolen from us. One of the reasons the world couldn't make any progress is because business people couldn't really collect their wealth and reinvest it very easily. It wasn't very transportable, and it was so easily stolen. So the business people have, the narrative about business has always been that business people only care about money. That's the only value they really hold, and that's just not a very noble human aspiration. So the narrative about business has always been negative. And then, of course, as capitalism got going and we began to see wealth really beginning to be created in larger scale, the antipathy towards business went up several notches. You had people like Karl Marx come out and basically talk about the labor being exploited by capital, even though statistically wealth was increasing. Illiteracy rates were going down. Prosperity was systematically moving up at that 1 to 2% a year, which compounded over decades and eventually centuries, lifted up basically everybody in the society. So the intellectuals have always been the enemy of business. The intellectuals hate business today. They hated it 100 years ago. They hated it 200 years ago. They hated it 500 years ago. And I promise you they will hate it 100 years from now. Intellectuals do not like business people. I don't know why. You speculate on it. Maybe it's because the business people, the intellectuals were the ones that made all the good grades in college and went on to teach at universities, and the business people went out and made a lot of money. It's offensive to some sense of cosmic justice that these dumbasses have all the money. They must have stolen it somehow or another. So there is sort of this zero-sum mentality that is one of the real problems in people's narrative about business. Because of sports, perhaps, we have this idea that if somebody's winning, necessarily someone else must be losing. I didn't know how we kind of think of things. So if somebody's got rich, that must have been the result of someone else being poor. And one of the great truths about business and capitalism is that it doesn't work like that. It's not a zero-sum game. You lose when somebody else wins in business. Business is the great value creator because it creates value for everyone that trades with it. So, for example, business creates value for its customers, right? I mean, to use Whole Foods as an example, no one's forced to exchange with Whole Foods. People do so because they believe it's in their best interest. And we have lots of competition out there. So if people are unhappy with the quality or the selection of the service and prices, they're not trapped. They can go down the street. And that, of course, forces Whole Foods to be more competitive. The people that we employ, the team members, they're not slaves. This is the best job they're able to find based for wages, benefits, working conditions, opportunities for advancement, or they would take a job somewhere else. We create value for our suppliers. Whole Foods deals with about 100,000 suppliers. And many of those, most of them are actually very, very small, kind of mom and pop businesses or small farmers. And they trade with us. And as a result, I've watched so many mom and pop businesses trade with Whole Foods become prosperous through and become actually very wealthy over time because they started out at Whole Foods and were able to expand their businesses. So business creates value for suppliers. It creates value for investors. The profits that are made end up being recycled into society and is the basic foundation for all government taxes, either from individuals paying income taxes or business paying taxes directly. The entire governmental sector ultimately stands on the back of the private sector, the wealth that business creates. If the business sector declines, then necessarily the public sector will also eventually decline as well. Business creates value for the communities that it's in, both philanthropically and through taxes it pays, and communities flourish as a result. So business are creating value for customers, employees, suppliers, investors, communities. And the only ones that potentially are losing in this are the competitors, right? But even the competitors don't necessarily have to lose, because one of the great truths about businesses is that competition and free choice forces you to improve and get better. And if you do, then you'll be able to maintain your business. And if you don't, your customers will vote you out of the marketplace. You'll actually fail. But it's been my experience that, for the most part, competition is a very good thing, and it is the incentive that businesses need in order to improve. So there's this great win-win-win, we call win six in the book. All of these are benefiting and winning, and that is what's collectively helps our society to advance. The entrepreneurs are the heroic ones in the capitalistic enterprise because the entrepreneurs are the creative ones. They go out and invent new businesses, new business processes that enable, through competition, for the society to advance. So we do see business as good, and yet it has this narrative, the intellectuals and the defenders of capitalism also guilty of, as basically being all about money. Business people only care about money. If you go to a party and you just ask people what the purpose of business is, you can do this experiment. Almost all the time, the answer, people look at you kind of quizzically and say, what do you mean, what's the purpose of business? Everybody knows the purpose of business. The purpose of business is to make money. That's what everybody says. That's the default answer. It's such an odd answer. If you ask what the purpose of a doctor is, doctors are very well compensated. They make a lot of money. I've never yet had doctors say, what's the purpose of medicine? Make as much money as possible. Absolutely. What's the purpose of teachers? Purpose of doctors to heal, right? What's the purpose of a teacher? To educate. We have teachers in this room. What's the purpose of architects? They design buildings. Engineers construct things. You can go profession after profession, and every one of them refers back to some type of value creation they are doing for other people. And here's business, the greatest value creator of all, creating value for customers, for employees, for suppliers, and investors. And it's contracted down to why does it exist? It exists to make money. And with that narrative, is it any surprise that business is distrusted and hated? It's just a bunch of greedy, selfish bastards running around dumping the wealth of others into their pockets and then sticking it in a Swiss bank. If we're going to change the narrative about business, the first thing we have to do is we have to discover or rediscover the purpose, the higher purpose of business besides just making money. Now, there's nothing wrong with making money. Whole Foods Market is very profitable. Our market capitalization is like $18 billion. We are the most highly valued pure food retailer in the entire United States. It's because we're very successful, very profitable business. But just as my body produces red blood cells, if I stop producing red blood cells, I will die. It does not logically follow that the purpose of my life is to produce red blood cells. I have a more transcendent purpose that gives my life meaning. Similarly, business can't exist unless it's profitable. It will die. It will not be able to innovate. It will not be able to meet competition. It will not be able to replace equipment when it wears out. So profits are absolutely essential to the business, but it does not logically follow that is why the business exists. It exists to create value for other people in some form or fashion. So business has got to rediscover its higher purpose. That is the first tenet of conscious capitalism. Why do you exist? How would the world be different if you stopped existing? As long as business continues to try to defend itself strictly on the basis of we create prosperity, you've already lost the argument. Because the ethical foundation of business is what's being attacked. Business is not legitimate because it's all about money. Anybody see the documentary, The Corporation? One or two people? As I like to joke, I don't recommend the film, but because it's so anti-business, anti-corporation. But it has a thesis, and that thesis is that businesses and corporations are fundamentally a bunch of sociopaths. They're sociopathic because they don't care about anything except making more money. And it's like a virulent disease that we've got to stop. You want to know how come how come government's got so big in the United States? It's fundamentally because the society has decided the corporations are a bunch of greedy bastards. We've got to have a really big government to stop them. Otherwise, they're going to keep dumping all their toxins in the rivers. They're going to continue to exploit workers. They're going to continue to defraud and rip off consumers. They're going to continue to cheat, rape, pillage, and exploit. And we've got to stop it. So when business will begin to articulate, first within its own community, of why it exists, what its purpose is, we will begin to reverse the narrative. So that's my first message, our first message in the book, my first message today. The second tenet of conscious capitalism is that that it doesn't just create value for its investors. That when I hear that over and over again, our business exists to maximize long-term shareholder value. And of course, business does partly exist to do that. But that's not the only stakeholder that matters. Investors are important, but so are all the other major stakeholders. And the best way I can get people to understand it is I use a simple analogy. At Whole Foods, the job of management is to hire the very best people we can find, make sure that they're well trained in the work, and then that they're happy. Because we found that when our team members at Whole Foods are happy, they take care of the customers better. They make the customers happy. And when the customers are happy, they become the best marketing that the business will ever have, word of mouth. They become loyal, they give repeat business, and then the business flourishes, and that makes the investors happy. So happy employees results in happy customers, which results in happy investors. And you have this virtuous circle of everyone being happy. And when you realize that your suppliers are part of your larger system, larger business system, and then it's essential, they give competitive advantage, that it's essential that your suppliers also flourish. So once you begin to think of the business as a larger system, and your job as a manager or as an executive is to help the system to simultaneously flourish, you begin to enter into a stakeholder mindset as opposed to just a shareholder mindset. And what confuses people about the stakeholders is what I call the trade-off mentality. They somehow think that the stakeholders, again, they have this very limited picture of this finite pie. And so if one stakeholder is gaining, then some other stakeholder is getting less. This mindset of trade-offs is one of the first things you have to let go of. Because anytime you come up with trade-offs in business, it's fundamentally a lack of imagination. It's fundamentally a lack of creativity. There don't need to be these trade-offs. And the goal of the entrepreneur, the goal of the creative executive, is to come up with strategies where all of the stakeholders are simultaneously winning. At Whole Foods Market, if we have an idea and we start thinking through the stakeholders and we see that, oh, well, that's not going to be good for our team members, we don't do it. That just means we haven't thought about it. Well, if we come back and it's like, that sounds good, but that's not going to be good for the environment, we've got to rethink that one. Or if we come back and say, I really don't think that's going to be an overall good thing for the communities we're part of, non-starter. You have to think your strategies so that all the stakeholders are winning, or it's not a good strategy. Because all of these stakeholders are interdependent on one another, as my example showed. Happy employees, happy customers, happy investors, flourishing, successful business. So the second tenet is this idea that stakeholders are interdependent, and we should manage the business in a conscious way so that all of the stakeholders, all the major stakeholders are winning. The third tenet of conscious capitalism is that for these type of businesses, we need a different kind of leader than we traditionally have. Now, if you think about the motivations for why many people have gone into leadership or wanted to be leaders, there's two overwhelming motives for most people: power and money. Leaders have more power, and some people like to have power over other people. They get off on it. They like bossing people around. We all experience people bossing us around, and you can see oftentimes how much the people doing the bossing delight in it. And then, of course, the leaders tend to get paid more. And so people want money, so if you can get to the top of the hierarchy, you'll get more money. Now, I don't think these motives are going to disappear, human nature being what it is, but we need, in these conscious businesses, people to move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs a bit and become more self-actualizing and move out of the lower need levels, the predominant ones. And the type of leaders that our organizations are going to need in this much more complex 21st century that we're finding ourselves in are leaders, A, who have a higher degree of emotional intelligence. It's been my experience at Whole Foods Market that emotional intelligence is a far better predictor of success at Whole Foods than simple IQ. Now, our universities they're geared towards developing what I call cognitive intelligence, the ability to analyze things, compare and contrast. It's the type of intelligence, by the way, that immediately leaps towards trade-offs. And it starts to analyze it and break it down. That type of intelligence is very important. I'm not anti-IQ, I'm not anti-innate intelligence. It's just simply not enough. It's not, by itself, it's not enough. We need this much higher degree of emotional intelligence, the ability to, A, self-awareness, B, the ability to empathize. Because as organizations are so complex, how many people read Steve Jobs' book, the Walter Isaacson biography? That is truly a great book. I highly recommend it. But when I was reading it, and I actually really admire Steve Jobs. He's of my generation, and he's the greatest entrepreneur of our generation. And yet, I couldn't help but think while I was reading the book was, this guy's a jerk. And a lot of people are going to get the wrong idea that this is the way you should lead people. And at Whole Foods Market, to go to work at Whole Foods, you have to get voted on by your team. It requires a 2/3 positive vote after you've been on the team 30 to 90 days. And when I was reading that book, I thought, you know what? Steve Jobs would not get voted on to a team. He would not, and that probably was because as brilliant as he was, his lack of emotional intelligence would have disqualified him. So, if you are a great enough genius, you can overcome a lack of emotional intelligence, but I don't recommend it. Most people do not have Steve Jobs' creative genius. And if you're just stuck with being a jerk, you find it doesn't work that well in business. We need leaders who have a higher degree of spiritual intelligence. By spiritual intelligence, I fundamentally mean ethical, and I mean your ability to perceive purpose and meaning. The very thing I've been talking about today is a type of intelligence that you can see value and you can see purpose. But most of all, we need leaders who are what we call servant leaders. By servant leaders, we mean leaders who serve the higher purpose of who dedicate themselves to the mission of the institution. This is something people at universities often get because oftentimes the faculty have a sense of purpose in their teaching. It's one reason they wanted to teach. It's a little harder sometimes when I'm out talking to the business community per se. But that servant leadership serves the purpose and the mission of the business. And it serves the entire stakeholder group. Different type of consciousness. We give some examples of that in the book, but for time's sake, I won't talk about it today. And then the fourth tenet, if we have to create different kinds of cultures in our organizations. Most organizations' cultures happen sort of automatically. There's good elements to it, there's toxic elements. And the conscious business thinks through their culture. I always say one of my things at Whole Foods now is my role partly is to monitor the culture of Whole Foods and ask which parts of the culture are no longer good and which ones do we sort of need to prune or even root out. Because we need to create cultures that really allow human beings to be fully human and flourish, to self-actualize themselves. That's not the way corporations have been in America. And I'll give the best example of that is love. I always like to say love is in the closet in corporate America. It's not something you see in abundant quantities in our corporations. And yet, of course, we know that love and care are what it means to be fully human. If we're going to create really good organizations, love can't be something you just do when you go home. It can't be something that you just do with your families and your friends. Love's something that has to be within our corporate structures. There's many ways we can nurture that, many ways we can cultivate it. One of the healthiest things that's happening, of course, is that women are rising up in our society at an incredibly rapid rate. I mean, and during the research of the book, I was sort of blown away with some statistics we discovered. One, did you know 60% of all college degrees now are being awarded to women? Did you know that 70% of all graduate degrees are being awarded to women? 70%. Women are systematically taking over law, medicine, accounting, education. And from my perspective, this is a very, very good thing. Because if you think about the metaphors that have dominated corporate thinking, they're almost all war metaphors. War or Darwinian metaphors. We are going to so kill those guys. You are dead meat, dude. It's a jungle out there. This is only the paranoid survive. This is survival of the fittest. Kill or be killed. And this is the way this is the way guys talk. Even when there aren't any women around. Even when there are a few women around, they still talk like that. And that makes it really hard to nurture love, relationships, community, if you're basically thinking about killing everybody. So we have to create these type of cultures in our corporations that are places that people really want to hang out in. where people flourish. I mean, every business should be striving to be one of the 100 best companies to work for, or to have that kind of mindset so that your turnover rates are low, so people are continuing to learn, grow, and evolve. It should be one of the things that the leadership of the company is thinking about. How do we create a better place to work? How do we create a culture that really allows people to learn, grow, self-actualize themselves, and evolve as human beings? So let me just go back over the 4 tenets, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. The first is that business has this potential for higher purpose, and we are going to have to articulate that. Secondly, that we should manage the business in a conscious way to create value for all of our major stakeholders, not only the investors. Thirdly, that we need a different kind of leader, one who has a higher degree of emotional, spiritual, systems intelligence, who serves as a servant leader and serves the enterprise that they're part of. And fourth, we have to create cultures that are more humanistic, more empowered, and help the people that work at the institution or the organization to reach their highest potentials in life. That, in essence, is conscious capitalism. I hope I've given you a good commercial to read the book. We wrote the book for 2 basic audiences. We wrote it for business people, obviously. But even more importantly, we wrote it for the millennial generation. It's coming of age right now. Because it will be the millennials, the entrepreneurs and the millennials that will create the conscious businesses that will help lift our nation up. America's in decline right now. We are rapidly declining. I mean, if our economic freedom in America, for most of American history, we were the freest nation in the world in terms of economic freedom. We were so poor 200 years ago, and America lifted itself up, again, through capitalism, through economic freedom. And just not very long ago, we still ranked number 3 in the world in economic freedom. In the year 2000, the United States still in the Freedom Index, Economic Freedom Index, ranked number 3 behind Hong Kong and Singapore, which were both basically cities, city-states. In just the last 12 years, the United States has dropped down to number 18. And we are like in free fall for economic freedom. If you want to know why, unemployment remains high. And if you want to know why per capita income has actually dropped in the last decade, almost 10%. You don't have to look any further than that statistic. Economic freedom is declining. As economic freedom declines, so does our prosperity. They are directly related. We're an amazing country, but it's been our economic freedom that has been what's enabled us to become so prosperous. If we move away from that, so does our prosperity decline. Interestingly now, countries like China and India are embracing more economic freedom, and they've lifted hundreds of millions of people up out of poverty in just the last 30 years. So, the millennial generation will be the generation, hopefully, the heroic generation that will embrace conscious capitalism in terms of economic freedom combined and done in a more conscious way. They will create the enterprises that will fundamentally transform our society. That's your homework assignment, young people here. Go out and create these businesses that will solve the problems that my generation is bequeathing to you. I think I'll stop there. So let's we collected some questions. Thank you very much.
Any questions that you haven't turned in? Those angels in the back should come around. And we're looking for student questions. This is for you. So we really want to hear from you. These questions are falling into 2 areas, sort of general philosophical type questions and then questions directly about Whole Foods. So the first question is really Miami-centric because we live and breathe Latin America. So will Whole Foods move into the emerging markets of Latin America?
Eventually.
And
But
if so,
I don't know when.
What is your hiring strategy and your cultural acumen to go into Latin America?
What is mine? I have none.
The Whole Foods cultural acumen.
I mean, Whole Foods, our cultural acumen is our company is very decentralized. I mean, I didn't go into culture in any detail, but let me give you some principles for a conscious culture. First, Decentralization. Decentralization, Whole Foods is divided into 12 geographical regions. Each of the regions is they're very much running their own business. Each region is further subdivided into stores. Stores are also fairly autonomous in the sense that they have a responsibility and they have a lot of autonomy and creativity. And then within the store are self-managing work teams. And teams are responsible, like a produce team, grocery team, and they do their own hiring, and as you heard a little bit about our team system in terms of being placed on a team, going through the probationary period and being voted on. And so decentralization combined with empowerment results in experimentation. Experimentation results in innovations. Innovations plus collaboration spreads the ideas. So my point in terms of answering that question is that we're so decentralized and we're so flexible that we basically customize ourselves to every community that we're in. Our stores in Florida are very different than our stores in California, which are very different than our stores in Texas, which are very different. Stores in Texas, in Austin, are very different than stores in Dallas or Houston. So any stores we opened in Latin America would be very unique. They would reflect the communities that they're in. We're not like McDonald's or Starbucks or some chain that comes up with a prototype and simply replicates it over and over and over again. Instead, we're more like custom home builders, build unique stores that reflect the communities and values that we live in.
That's great. Okay, now, I have several questions in this area. What are the few key lessons you've learned from Whole Foods that a small business can emulate as they're building their business?
Well, I mean, of course, I did write a book about that kind of. So,
No, but if you want to.
I mean, the same things apply to a small business. You go through a sort of a life cycle with a business. You have different challenges based on your life cycle. Whole Foods is much further along in its life cycle. Initially, almost any startup business is going to have problems with capital. That's usually the biggest restraint, is having enough money, particularly enough working capital where you can survive. And that was a real challenge Whole Foods had. I was so happy when Whole Foods finally went public, because finally we had enough working capital where we didn't, I don't know how many times in the history of the company, I, who didn't really have much money, was loaning the company money just so it would have sufficient money to pay suppliers on time, make payrolls, that type of thing. So any type of business is going to go through that type of challenge probably, unless it's just a massive amount of money at the beginning, and that creates its own set of problems. And I mean, so you go through this life cycle of a business. Now, I mean, Whole Foods has created a culture that I think is applicable to almost any business. And I think that, so the moral of the story is you have to discover your higher purpose, think about what your stakeholders, and by the way, most entrepreneurs, contrary to the mythology about entrepreneurs, I've known hundreds of entrepreneurs, I've known very few of them who started their business primarily to make a lot of money. Mostly they were on fire about some type of difference they wanted to make in the world. It's like, I've got this great idea for X. And that's all they can think about. They want to create X. And they're just passionate about it. They obsess about it. And they go on and do it. Entrepreneurs are creative and they're doers. And they tend to be fire-ready, aim type of people. They don't come up with big, detailed plans. They basically start their business. I've gotten to know the guy that started Tom's Shoes, Blake Markowski. I've become friends. He's a classic entrepreneur. You just talk to the guy, and they all have a little bit of attention deficit disorder, because they're eager to get out there and do things. So you've got to have your purpose. You've got to have your drive and your passion to realize in the world, and then you just figure it all out. And the big lesson is you can do it. It's not going to be easy. It'll be a lot of hard work. You'll make some mistakes, but you just have to go for it. And I mean, I will tell you a little story to answer this question. I took no business classes. I studied philosophy and religion when I went to the University of Texas. The big thing that changed my life was I was about 20 years old. I'm studying philosophy. I'm reading Jean Paul Sartre's Being and Nothingness. And I'm reading, or trying to read it. I'm having trouble making heads or tails out of this book. And I remember one day I just threw the book down on the ground. And I said, I'm never, ever going to read another book in my life I don't want to read. I dropped the course the next day. Then as I started working through the implications of it, I was like, you know what? I'm never going to take another course. Well, I don't want to take. Which resulted, I have 120 hours of electives. No college degree. And then I worked it through. It's like, you know what? I'm not even going to do anything else in my life that I don't have passion for, that doesn't fit into my own sense of purpose and meaning. And as I followed that path, that led me to create Whole Foods Market. Just step by step, I can look back on it, totally makes sense. So I made these decisions to commit myself to my own path, so to speak. It led me into creating Whole Foods, which led me to the purpose of my life. So the moral of that story is that follow your heart, follow your passions, and go out and create things. And there is no right path for that. You kind of have to create your own path.
Okay, going different direction. How does Whole Foods reconcile your business strategy of maximizing profits with issues such as selling products that may be a health challenge to consumers, such as GMO products, questionable quality, and fraud in olive oil? How's Whole Foods handling those kind of issues?
Let me hold this one here. Well, first of all, I feel like I failed in my talk today because Whole Foods' higher purpose is not to maximize profits. The initial higher purpose of Whole Foods from the very beginning, when Renee and I started it, first little Safeway store back in 1978, we wanted to sell healthy food to people, earn a living, and have fun. That was our initial higher purpose of Whole Foods. Now, our purpose is still there, but it's grown in complexity as we've evolved as an organization. So now Whole Foods' higher purpose is, we want to help heal. We want to help heal America. We want to help heal the world. The statistics are startling. 69% of Americans are overweight. 36% are obese. 80% of the money we spend on healthcare go for diseases: heart disease, stroke, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune diseases that honestly most people should never get. These are primarily dietary and lifestyle diseases. There will not be a vaccination for cancer. There will not be a pill you can take to reverse heart disease. These are things that we're doing to ourselves, and we can stop doing it. So part of Whole Foods' purpose is to sell the healthy food to people and educate people about the principles of healthy eating so that we don't have to get these diseases. And then, of course, we've got purposes regarding sustainable agriculture, purposes regarding Whole Planet Foundation in terms of ending poverty. And I'm fulfilling part of my purpose and Whole Foods' purpose by even being here today talking about conscious capitalism. Because we're so concerned about what's happening to business and how it's being trashed, and that we have to reverse this tide. Business has a very heroic, important role to play. So that's Whole Foods' higher purpose. It's not about primarily maximizing profits. And let's see.
The GMO question.
Maybe health challenges, consumers with GMO. Whole Foods just came out with, first of all, Whole Foods sells more non-GMO products than any other food retailer in the United States. So there is no food retailer who aren't selling some GMO products. And if they say they're not, they're lying. That's the honest truth. But Whole Foods has made a commitment recently that we will have full transparency on labeling of GMO products within the next 5 years. So we're taking a very proactive role on that. Let's see.
That was the end of the first.
Questionable quality and fraud of olive oil. I don't think olive oil is a fraud, but I don't think it's particularly healthy for you. It's got a myth about its healthfulness, but that's primarily done by Italy and Greece. You can't lay that one on Whole Foods Market.
Okay, I just got to see we have one last question. This is sort of a combination of several. Other than your book, which they're all mine, We'd like to know about, is there a formal corporate social responsibility program that other companies can emulate or business students can study? What do you recommend?
First, I'd recommend looking at or read my book, but secondly, we have a nonprofit organization. You can go online, and you're allowed to turn your phones back on, at www.consciouscapitalism.org. In fact, we have a big conference that's going to be this weekend. So I'm flying today to San Francisco, where that conference will be. But you can look online, you can see that we are trying to, we're trying to start a movement, honestly. So and you can see that, and you can try to set up chapters, and so there's ways to get involved. You go to that website. Was there another part of that question, or not?
I think you did. So anyway, this is the last question. We're going to move to the book signing. But before we do, where's the Dean? Dean Clark? The Dean has a gift for you.
Oh, good. I hope it's small and black.
Yeah, I wanted to thank him very much for this, but I also want to thank again Books and Books. They had a lot to do with arranging this. If you don't know that, I don't call it a store, I call it an institution. It is an institution in Coral Gables. It's part of the Miami community. I would highly recommend that you go there. I mean, we need to support this fabulous institution. And I would encourage you to go there and buy books.
And make sure you buy this book and get it signed, and that's why we want
We will have a book signing. You just go out this way and line up, and we will be signing books. Thank you so much. And have a